Hello everybody and welcome back to a new video on my channel. This is number 4 of 5 of my resetting for 2024 series. So if you haven't seen the other videos yet, then make sure to go check them out and subscribe for more. If you are new here, hi, my name is Zoe. I am 23. I live in the New York City area and I recently graduated from college this past May, and so I'm working on figuring out my whole post-grad lifestyle. So if that is something that interests you, then make sure to subscribe to my channel. 2023 is over and I am a big reader. I love reading. I've always loved reading. I am not somebody who reads like a million books in a year, but this year my goal was 25 books and I did actually read 26 books. It was actually kind of annoying because I thought I read 25 and like Goodreads didn't update right away, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to read another book, and I had literally like 2 days to go in the year and I wound up reading 26 on accident. Today I'm just going to be going through everything that I read this past year, telling you my thoughts on it, what I rated it, and yeah, just doing a little 2023 reading recap. So let's get started. Okay, so we're gonna go from the bottom up to number 1. So starting with my least favorite book of the year, and I do actually think this is a little bit of a controversial one because I have heard so many people rave about this book. I was so excited to read it and I hated it. It just felt so immature. It was like not the best written. I felt like I was reading the same chapter over and over again, and I gave this book 2 stars, and that was Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. I know it's really popular, but I just did not vibe with this book. So if you are interested, because this might be a book that you really like, it gives like Gossip Girl in London. It's very rich girl, preppy vibes, but then there's like romance involved, but it's a lot of drama with the romance and what people are involved in. So the premise is really, really cool. I personally did not like the characters at all. I didn't like the writing, so it just wasn't for me, but it might be for you, so you never know. To be completely honest with you, that was really the only book I read this year that I actually did not like. And again, I was really disappointed by that. But from here on up, I actually kind of liked most of the books. Some of them I just happened to like more than others. So, in 25th place, I had Romantic Comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld. I gave this book 3 stars. I read it relatively recently in December, and I think the reason that I didn't vibe with this book much was just because, again, like I didn't connect with the characters. They are older characters and in a place in their lives that is very different from when I am in my life. Also, it takes place over the course of COVID, and to be honest, I don't like thinking about COVID that much anymore, and like that whole era of time when we were all just sitting around at home. So I think that those are 2 of the main reasons why I didn't personally love this book. However, it was a cute story. It basically follows this woman who works as a comedy writer, and she meets a celebrity on this show. Lots of the guys have actually wound up getting with and like dating and marrying some of the female celebrities that come on her show, and so she makes this whole skit about it, about how that never happens the other way around, but maybe it would happen the other way around. Who knows? It was fine. It wasn't as funny as I hoped either, so 3 stars. The next book I have is The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas. Of all of Sarah J. Maas's books, there's only one book I thought was worse than this one, and that was A Court of Frost and Starlight. I hate that book. It's such a pointless novella. But I also have a vendetta against novellas in general. I don't think that they need to exist. So, do with that what you will. I went in not really expecting much of it. It was fine. There were parts of it that were emotional and yeah, but like, I just didn't vibe with this book all that much, so that's why I gave it 3 stars. Again, not a book I hated, not a book I loved, but it's just kind of a book. Book number 23 is another book that I read relatively recently, and that was The Helsinki Affair by Anna Pitoniak. This was actually my book of the month pick for November, which is my first ever book of the month, and I had pretty low expectations for this, to be honest, because one of my friends read it and she said that she wasn't a big fan. But I didn't mind it. I thought it was enjoyable. I thought that it was a bit slow, and I felt like there was a really exciting beginning, and I felt like it would have been better had it been built up to that. So essentially this is supposed to be more of like a thriller, a spy novel type thing, but it was so slow paced that I was just like this doesn't feel like a thriller. Like, it's just not the type of thing that I want when I read a thriller novel. And so that was my main complaint with it, and so that's why I gave this 3 stars. Number 22 was The Mistake by Elle Kennedy. I read this on my iPad while I was traveling. It was a cute little read. It's a hockey romance. It's part of, I think it's like the Briar University books. I also read the first book this year, but I like that one more. To be honest, I don't really remember what happened in this book. I think it was like hockey player, smart girl, fall in love, but that could have been the first one, but maybe it was both of them, to be honest. Clearly, it wasn't super memorable. It was just like a cleansing read for me. I just wanted an easy little cute romance book, and I read it, and I liked it, but clearly not enough to remember it all that much. Number 21, honestly, it like kind of pains me to like hear these books being so low on this list, because I actually did like quite a lot of them, but again, it's just like there were other books that I read that I just thought were better. Coming in at 21 was The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This is the first book in the Folk of the Air series by Holly Black, and I really like this book. This is actually my second time reading it this year because I read it a couple of years ago, but I wanted to reread the trilogy this year. And I really like this series overall. I think it's a good series. This one I liked the least. I felt like it got a lot more interesting later on. Number 20 is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. This is a Romeo and Juliet retelling in Singapore, like in the mid-1900s, and I did really like this book. I just had a really hard time getting through it. Again, I felt like it was like slower than I expected. I think I was just going through a reading slump when I read it, so I just didn't love it, but I still gave it 3 stars. Number 19 is God's Behaving Badly, and this starts my 4-star reads. So God's Behaving Badly was just a cute little book. Honestly, I've been seeing it forever in Barnes & Noble, and I've been wanting to pick it up and read it, and I recently did. And I just thought it was just like a funny retelling. It definitely wasn't like a piece of art or anything. It was a pretty cliche story in my opinion, but I did really like the characters. I like the wittiness of the storyline. I like the way that the gods in this story were presented. Basically, all of the gods are in modern day England, in London, and they are not getting along. There are disagreements, and like they are struggling with their powers and all of this stuff. In one argument, something goes really badly, and so they have to try to figure out a way to get their powers back, essentially, with the help of some mortals, which is, you know, scandalous. Next is The Deal by Elle Kennedy. So this is the first book in that Briar University, I think that's what it's called, series. So The Deal is the first book and The Mistake is the second book. I definitely like The Deal more. It got me out of a reading slump. I had like just finished These Violent Delights, and I was like, I don't want to read. Like, it had taken me like months to get through These Violent Delights. Through no fault of that book, just through me just not wanting to read. And I read this in like one night, and I loved it. I thought it was so good, and that's why I read the second book in the series. Her writing is just really easy to digest. It's fun, it's fast-paced, it touches some heavy topics. I do want to warn you about that. But overall, it was just an easier read, a little bit of a palate cleanser for me. And yeah, so that's why I liked it a lot. Next is One Little Spark by Marty Sklar. I love Disney. I watched The Imagineering Story a few years ago. I'm obsessed with that kind of thing. I think it is so cool. Something I'd love to maybe try my hand at one day. Marty Sklar is like an OG Imagineer for Disney World, and this is just basically his tips on literally like becoming an Imagineer and like what Imagineering is like and the kind of lessons that he learned. And although it focuses a lot on Imagineering, I think that it also really goes into some interesting points just on teamwork in general. And one of my resolutions this year was to read some more nonfiction books. So this is one of my nonfiction books that I read, and I did really enjoy it. I mean, it's Disney, so how can I not? Number 16 is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This was my emergency at the last minute read because it's a short book, and it only took me like a day and a half to read it. I have actually never read this book before. I have seen the movie like back in high school, the one with Leonardo DiCaprio, but I thought that reading it was really intriguing. I definitely want to like sit down and like actually think about it for a minute because I read it really quickly, but I really did like it. It was definitely a thought-provoking read, but it also is just like a good story in my opinion. You're presented with such like so many like unreliable characters that you're just like left guessing like what's actually going on. I watched, I don't remember what it was called, the show exactly, but it was about like Anna Delvey, that girl who basically was like, she was like claiming to be like this heiress in New York City, and she actually like had no money and was like managing to like build this whole empire without having paid like a dime essentially. And Gatsby reminded me of her a little bit in that like you're just kind of like, well, like how did she get to this point? Who is she? Like all of this, that kind of question. So that was something I really liked about it, and that's why I think it got higher up in my list of books this year. Number 15, I have Lord of Shadows by Cassandra Clare. I think this one is lower down because A, it was a reread. I still gave it 4 stars, but it was just lower down because it took me forever to read this book too. I think towards the end, I just got so bored. Like, basically like these pages, like these like 300 pages here, I was like, I'm not intrigued anymore because I knew what was coming. Like I had read enough that I had like jogged my memory and remembered the end, and so I was just like, I'm not like motivated to read because I'm curious about what's gonna happen next. So that is just a byproduct of rereading a book in my opinion. I still love the end of this book. I think it is so good. Like the last 100 pages, wonderful. The middle, yeah. But Cassandra Clare is one of my absolute favorite authors and has been for forever, so she can do no wrong. Number 14 is Persuasion by Jane Austen. I'm glad that I got a couple of classics in this year. So I actually took a class my last semester of college where it was literally just a Jane Austen class, and we read this book and this book only. It was such a fun class, which to be honest might also impact the reason why I like this book so much, because if I'm being honest with you, like this book is short, but it is slow. Like when somebody says like a slow burn romance, this book defined that. Like it is very slow paced. But I love Jane Austen. I love her happy endings. Like, do you blame me? And there's something about how relatable this book is so much later. Like, I genuinely think she was just way ahead of her time. Pride and Prejudice is like one of my absolute favorite books and movies and TV shows. So yeah, do with that what you will. I am biased because I had the fun of being in this little class and getting to learn about it in that context. But usually whenever I learn about books in school, I wind up really not liking them. And this was like the only class, like English class that I took. It really wasn't English class though. It was more of like a book club. And yeah, this was just a really good book and I really liked it. Number 13 is The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. I really liked this book. This is another kind of random one that I picked up because I thought the cover looked cool. Basically, this takes place in Italy in, I want to say the 1500s, and it's about this girl who is forced to marry this duke, and she mysteriously died the next year. So it's kind of a story from her perspective of growing up in Italy and Florence in this like royal family, and then marrying this person and kind of having a little downfall. So it is a historical fiction book, and I don't know, I was just really intrigued. I really liked it. The writing was really pretty. Like, when I say beautiful writing, like this is the kind of writing that I picture. Next, I have my obligatory, every year I have to read a Dan Brown book. So this year I read Origin, and I loved this book. I thought it was really good. It really had me thinking because a lot of the plot of this book is includes like AI and technology and development and that kind of thing, which just felt really fitting because I was reading it in the summer as I started my new job, which is kind of techie, I guess. And like so much of the conversation there is about AI and artificial intelligence, and it's just obviously with ChatGPT this year, it's just kind of like boomed all of a sudden, so it just felt like very interesting timing to read this book and to, like, I don't know, I just had some really good conversations with people coming out of this book, and I thought that the story had like cool twists and turns, as his books always do. I will say sometimes I cannot guess his plot twist at all. This one I did guess, so that was a little downside, but it was still really, really good. I also listened to that as an audiobook. I don't know what it is. I always listen to Dan Brown books as audiobooks. The next book that I am putting in this list, I also read as an audiobook, and that is Lessons in Chemistry. This book was just, I honestly like feel like I went through a lot of emotions with this book, and I gave it less stars right after I finished reading it. But looking back on it now, it's one of the books that have really stuck with me this year. And I haven't watched a TV show or anything. I don't think I could bring myself to do that because I actually bawled my eyes out reading this book. It's so intriguing to hear about a woman like the main character of this book. So what happens in, I keep on forgetting that like you may not actually know what these books are about. Okay. Basically, if you haven't heard, the premise of this book is this scientist winds up on this TV show, a cooking show, where she like uses science to like have all of these really good recipes, right? But she's very like practical, like she's kind of like that like nerd, socially awkward type person, but like she also doesn't care that she's socially awkward, and she winds up being a single mother through a series of circumstances, and it kind of takes you through her journey and her understanding of herself in regards to her work, in regards to the time that she's living in, because this is in like the 50s when women were not really allowed in the workplace that much, and even when they were not really appreciated, I suppose, and they had to go through a lot of really tough things, and the main character in this kind of embodies that sense, but also just a sense of doing what you are interested in doing and what you really love and that you're really passionate about, and how sometimes life doesn't go to plan, but you have to figure it out anyway. Okay, we're into my top 10 books of this year now. So, number 10, we have Lady Midnight by Cassandra Clare. This is the first book in the Dark Artifices series, so Lord of Shadows is the second book, and this is the first book. And I just like this book more than Lord of Shadows. I think that the plot just had me going a little bit more. I was more excited about it, and I didn't remember this book as much, so it was because it was a reread. And so I read it a bit quicker, and I just enjoyed it more. Julian and Emma's relationship in this is like heartbreaking. Number 9, I have The Wicked King. So this is the second book in the Folk of the Air series by Holly Black. So the second one after The Cruel Prince. I really like this book. To be honest, this book and the third book kind of blend together in my brains, but this whole series is about Jude and her family, and she was brought up in a family very much to do with war. She is embracing war. She is finding her violent side, and I just think her character development was really, really interesting, which is why I like the second and third books more. Her development, and then also Cardin's, who is like the main like antagonist kind of romance dude, you know? Just seeing their relationships develop, and also just like seeing Jude kind of come into herself and figure out who she is, even if maybe her decisions aren't what I agree with. It's still interesting to read. Number 8, we have my next nonfiction book of this year, and that was Serenade by Tony Bentley. For those of you who don't know, I am a dancer. I do ballet. I love ballet. I did it much more seriously in high school. I just like take random recreational classes now, but I still really, really love it. And this book is about Balanchine, who is like a major figure in the ballet world, and Serenade, which is just such a gorgeous ballet. It's literally, you can find it on YouTube, it's like 30 minutes. I would definitely recommend watching it. It's so intriguing, and basically I love especially the way like the first half of this book was written. It kind of followed along the ballet, and the ballet isn't a story ballet, it's literally just like choreography, and so it kind of like relates this choreography to pivotal moments in the history of Balanchine. So it was really, really interesting to read, and I really enjoyed it. Number 7 is Daisy Jones and the Six. The TV show I think came out this year, if I'm correct. I also watched the TV show though, but I really like this book. This book is by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And it's written as like an interview, which is really interesting because again, it's kind of got a little bit of like an unreliable narrator vibe to it because you're hearing all of these different stories and you kind of have to decipher which one of them is correct. And then I watched the TV show and I felt like it didn't allow for as much interpretation as the book did, and that was one of my favorite things about the book. So I was sad that that isn't really part of the show as much. Number 6, I have Caraval. This was a book I read pretty early in the year and I gave it 5 stars, so we're onto my 5-star reads now. To be honest though, looking back, it's one of those books I don't really remember. I remember really liking the vibe of it. It was a very different magic sense than I feel like I normally read. It was much more of like circusy type magic than like normal fantasy books that I tend to read and lean towards. So that was really interesting. I think that's why I really liked it. I am eager to read the next books in the series. Hopefully I like them just as much. Okay, now we're into the top 5. So number 5 was The Queen of Nothing, which is the last book in that Folk of the Air trilogy by Holly Black. And yeah, I just really like the way that this series wrapped up. I thought it was done really well, and like I said, I just like Jude's character development and also Cardin's, and the whole shebang was really good. Number 4 is Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. I read this like right after I graduated, like after I'd started working and all of that kind of stuff, and I just felt like it was really timely. She's really writing about her life in her 20s and how like things that she's learned has affected her throughout her life, and it's really entertaining. It's quite funny, like it's an uplifting read, but it also like really, it comes to some conclusions that I really liked and that I felt like resonated well with me, especially at the time that I read that in my life. So if you're in your 20s, I would highly recommend this book. It's not like, there are emotional parts to it too, like it's not just all fun and games, but it's definitely like a thought-provoking read. Number 3, so my top 3 books, yay! Coming in at number 3 is Becoming by Michelle Obama. I listened to this as an audiobook. I thought that it was amazing. I loved hearing her perspective on things. I think she is an incredible writer. Also, the fact that it was an audiobook meant that I was listening to her tell her own story, and that was really cool. And I loved it. It was amazing. Then, like, my top 3 books were all so close for which book was my favorite book of the year. I'm really glad that I read this one though. It was incredible. Especially because I am not somebody who is super into like politics by any means. And it was just really cool to hear her perspective and how the way that she presented topics as well. Like, I don't agree with all of her opinions even, but I felt like the way that she presented them was just really cool and really, like I said, thought-provoking, and had me evaluating my opinions on a lot of things, and also gave light to a lot of opinions I had, and I don't know, it was just very well done. Number 2, the second best book of the year was Red Rising by Paris Brown. I cannot wait to read the rest of these books. It just like was so fast-paced. It was like Hunger Games meets Divergent meets like, I don't know, Percy Jackson, and it was just so active and intriguing, and the characters were so well done. Basically, it's in a world where there's like different colors define who you are. There's like castes essentially, and in the start of this book, some really traumatic things happen to this kid, and he winds up going and trying to become like the best caste. He was the lowest caste, and he's now trying to become the best caste, and he has to like compete to get there, and like he has to meet all these people and make friends, but like it's like awkward because like he's not really supposed to, like they can't know him. He's like the lowest caste. Anyway, please read this book. Okay, the moment you've all been waiting for, but nobody is surprised by, my best book of the year is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This is just such a good book. I like, a part of me, like I don't like it whenever I read a hyped book because I know everybody else hypes the book and I'm like, I want to be different. But like, you know what I mean? Like I'm skeptical of the overly hyped books, but this is overhyped for a reason, and you should definitely read this if you're into fantasy, if you like magic, if you like dragons. It's like they are in this college where they have to learn how to ride a dragon or they die basically, and because their country is at war and it's like a war college, but there's like a lot of romance and like magic and powers involved. And like obviously the main character is more of like an underdog character, so that also makes it a really interesting read, and it was just a good story. And I'm reading the second one right now, so we'll see if the second one holds up. I've heard that it's not as good, but still gonna give it my best shot. Anyway, Fourth Wing, obviously 5 stars, worth the hype. Okay, you guys, that was all of the books that I read in 2023. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, then make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Bye guys!